What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Six Pack Network. I'm your host, Dylan Clemons, and today Joe Bond, founder of Fantasy Six Pack, is my co-host, and we are continuing our training camp check-in shows where we are going around to all 32 NFL teams, interviewing a beat writer or reporter or a fan of the team on what they've seen or heard about training camp. In this episode, we're talking New Orleans Saints, and here helping us do so is Chris Battistel, who is a contributor at Fantasy and Frames and Club Fantasy. Chris, appreciate you giving us your time in such a busy part of the year. How you doing, man? Ready for football?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready, man. Ready as I ever can be. Thanks for having me, of course. Anytime I get the opportunity to talk New Orleans Saints, of course, as you can see on me and around me, I'm going to take it. So I appreciate you guys having me on the show to talk what I bleed, and that is black and gold.
Love it. Glad to have you. Before we jump into the interview, I just want to remind everyone, please hit that like button, please subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell for notifications so you know when a new video drops on the channel. Then head on over to fantasy6pack.net/plans to become an all-access member where you get access to our award-winning rankings, draft cheat sheets, and F6P Discord, where you get all your custom league questions and custom league advice answered by anybody on the Fantasy Six Pack staff, and that truly is the best part. Right now, you can actually save a little bit of money, too, by using promo code F6PNFL24 for 15% off. But without further ado, Joe, let's jump right into it and hit Chris with the first question we got for him.
Yeah, start with quarterback. So Derek Carr had a bumpy first season with the Saints. A lot of injuries were part of that. Do you see a bit of a bounce back from Derek Carr this year and therefore like a bounce back of the offense in general? Or is this offensive line just going to be a problem all season and Derek Carr is going to be struggling with injuries probably again?
Yeah, I think we're looking closer towards the latter of your question there happening with Derek Carr. It's a much younger offensive line. It's going to take a little bit for them to mesh. I think if you look at what the overall age was last year compared to this year is 20 years younger. So they don't have Ramczyk, who's, thank you for your service, Ryan Ramczyk, anymore. A lot of these older guys across the line, Andres Pete, that the New Orleans Saints aren't going to be able to lean on. Now, they did draft with the first rounder, Talise Fuaga. As of right now, according to beat reports, he is the only solidified starter across the line. So it's competition throughout. Trevor Penning had a decent game against San Francisco, but his inconsistencies is what's going to stop him from being that week-to-week pro that the New Orleans Saints are going to need. Already through 2 preseason games, they're leading the NFL in QB hits. So it's not a good thing for Derek Carr. He will have the opportunity to kind of bounce back if everyone stays healthy. We've seen him throw for 4,000 yards consistently with Las Vegas. My worry with it is, can he hit that 30 touchdown mark? That's where I'm going to be looking for Derek Carr to improve. He's only done it once in his career, and that was in 2015. So I'm not looking towards Derek Carr this year in New Orleans Saints. He's going to need a lot to go his way in order for him to have that bounce back. He's going to need everyone to stay healthy. They're already dealing with injuries. Rashid Shaheed has a hurt toe. Kendre Miller we don't even know where he is, the back of a milk carton at this point on that offense. So really we just got Juwan Johnson back. We got Chris Olave. Chris Olave's been the one consistent producer for us on the offense, but I got Derek Carr at 25.5 passing touchdowns on the year. FanDuel has him at 21.5, so even they aren't expecting a big output.
I was going to say 25 seems optimistic.
Yeah.
Not going to lie, man. It really does.
It's really only because their schedule is kind of cakey. It's a little easy compared to what the rest of the NFL is. Projection-wise, at least at the start of the season. So I've kind of maybe my bias worked into that number a little bit too. But, I'm a little optimistic that he gets to that number at the very least.
All right.
Right on. Looking at the backfield now, you mentioned Kendre Miller, and unfortunately, he doesn't sound like he's had a great camp from everything we've heard from Dennis Allen, kind of just throwing him under the bus. Honestly, it's been a little wild to listen.
Sometimes you need a kick in the butt, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they definitely tried to give him one for sure. Once he's healthy, and Jamal Williams, the veteran back, is still there as well. Once Kendre Miller is healthy, do you see him having a decent, prominent role in this offense, or is it pretty much going to be all systems go for Alvin Kamara this year?
Right now, for me, it's all systems go for Alvin Kamara. There's been some beat reports stating that he has dealt with a little bit of back stiffness, which is not good for an aging running back like Alvin Kamara. But they've reported that it's most likely going to be a non-issue, just something that you need to monitor as we go. For Kendre Miller, it seems like it's fight or flight for him. Dennis Allen has kind of sentenced him to Shimanagashi, and it's not looking good for Kendre Miller. He is poised to be a cut candidate by the sounds of it, from what Dennis Allen has been telling us in his press conferences. He just hasn't been available since July with the hamstring injury. If you want to cuff Alvin Kamara, it's Jamal Williams for me. Dynasty, you're going to want to maybe stash Kendre Miller. He is a taxi stash at the very least. But yeah, for me this year, redraft wise, with the value that you can get him at, I'm taking Alvin Kamara wherever I can. He wasn't as efficient last year. You saw some of those efficiency numbers kind of drop from, but usage wise, he was still a focal point of that offense. 1,000 all-purpose yards. Yep. He didn't have the explosiveness, but he was still, I think, 83 targets throughout the year. So that's something that you want for the running backs that you're taking at the back end of your draft. If you're a 0 RB drafter and you're taking Alvin Kamara, you know that if he's healthy for the full year, he's most likely going to see somewhere between 70 to 85 targets, plus bulk of the workload out of the backfield. So Dennis Allen has been praising him through camp so far, and he's going to be the one guy, at least out of this backfield, that I'm going to target until cut days happen. Once cut days happen and we see Kendre Miller is still on the roster, if I have a shallow bench, I'm not going to touch him. If I have a deeper bench, or of course dynasty, I'm going to just hold on to that hope.
Absolutely.
I have Kendre Miller in dynasty, and I am praying that he makes it happen. I don't know. At this point, I don't have a lot of faith, but I'm hanging on by a thread with him.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Kamara heading in the draft season for sure. We already talked about the offensive line struggling a bet. Who's going to catch all those checkdowns, man? That's Alvin Kamara's game.
Exactly.
So
dude, and you mentioned the amount of targets and catches he had last year. Remember, he was suspended the first three
games. He missed the first 3.
That's crazy. I mean, it's hard to keep up that kind of pace and expect it. But yeah, I mean, I think easily 80, 90 targets is in his future for this year. But speaking of passing, so let's look at this receiving core. So you mentioned Chris Olave. We know he's the alpha in this offense when it comes to the receivers. So you mentioned Shaheed dealing with the injury. They got A.T. Perry. They got Equanimeous St. Brown. They got a bunch of dudes, right? What who's actually the wide receiver 2 on this offense, especially for, we're looking at it from a fantasy perspective, like Shaheed's like the guy, but is he like the guy we're really looking at for our sake here?
I mean, can I? Is it a cheat to say Alvin Kamara is the wide receiver 2 for the New Orleans Saints going into the year?
Because no, not really.
target potential wise, he's probably going to be the second guy on the list.
No, that's true. Olave. That's true.
Yeah, but wide receiver room, I got it right now projected to be Rashid Shaheed. Wide receiver wise, he was the second in targets last year. Mike Thomas has departed. He only played 10 games last year. He's vacating 68 targets. So if Shaheed can get 10 to 15% of those vacated targets from Mike Thomas, bump his 71 targets maybe up to 80 to 85 targets, then we could have a potential for Rashid Shaheed to fall into a top-end wide receiver 3, back-end wide receiver 2 role for fantasy managers. So really, for me, that's what it's going to come down to. If he can stay healthy too, because he does have the toe injury, are they going to utilize him a lot in the return game? If they do, that also creates more potential for injury. A toe injury for a wide receiver is not always great. But something when I dove into Rashid Shaheed last year, which I think is going to fit well into Kubiak's offensive system, although five of his touchdowns, well, all 5 of his touchdowns were for over 20 yards, the bulk of his target load came within the sticks. So that 0 to 9 yard mark is where 45% of his target share came from. So that's exciting for someone like Rashid Shaheed, as a Rashid Shaheed owner, seeing that he is hyper targeted in that spot of the field, albeit it was in a different offensive system. But the Kubiak system could lean a little more towards targeting him in that area and him utilizing his speed to get that yak. And yak, as fantasy managers, is just extra points.
Of course.
Absolutely. Looking at the tight end position, man, and with the Saints, it's been Taysom Hill's kind of been a thorn in the side of fantasy managers, especially guys who were a little bit in on Juwan Johnson last year. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit in on him. But unfortunately, it's a little bit disappointing. You mentioned he just got back from injury. Yeah. Do you see him having a bigger role in this offense, or is Taysom Hill still going to eat into a lot of his work? And you, as a Saints fan, I bet you love Taysom Hill, but as a fantasy owner, it's more like...
Yeah.
If you like Kamara, you hate Taysom Hill.
Yeah. It's a love-hate relationship with me with Taysom Hill. Right. I always like to peg him as the fantasy equivalent of a moped. It's fun and all, but don't let your friends doing it. He's fun to have on your roster, but don't let your friends catch you having him in your roster. He's going to be everywhere across the field, according to early camp reports. He's been lining up at fullback, tight end, quarterback, wide receiver, running back. Dennis Allen even came out and named some positions that he would put him in on the defensive side of the ball. Man, I was listening to Establish the Run today, and they said throughout the preseason, 20 snaps, all with the starters that Taysom Hill has played. He's lined up 9 as the running back, 7 as the inline tight end, twice in the slot, and twice out wide. So he is being utilized all over the field. We saw the San Francisco game, 5 carries, 20 yards with the touchdown. If his red zone usage is solid and he touches the ball, I think it's a little optimistic, 10 to 15 times a game, he can be a solid tight end option for you week in and week out. But I don't see it happening that way. I think he's going to be an inconsistent fantasy asset. He's going to be touchdown dependent, and you're going to be it's going to be tricky to decide when to plug and play Taysom Hill in 2024.
Sure. Yeah, I know a lot of people are still calling him, the cheat code tight end. And I'm going, I mean, he will be on the weeks that he actually hits, but it's that, like Bob Long likes to say, man, consistency is key. Taysom Hill is like one of the most inconsistent players that there is, that actually produces fairly well at the end of the year. You're like, oh, he scored all these points, but it was in like 6 games. It's so maddening, man. It's like Gabe Davis for the tight ends.
He'll definitely win you some weeks, but for sure, if you're playing him in every week,
Kubiak seems to really like this guy. You don't hear a lot of good reports coming out from the coaching staff based on some of the offensive players. It's really been a lot of, like we talked about at the beginning there, just a lot of kicking the bum to try to get these guys going. But Taysom Hill is the one. Every time I'm trying to look up Saints reports, it's like Taysom Hill's doing all the things great. Taysom Hill, Kubiak loves him some Taysom Hill. He's lining up all over the field. So I think he's going to be taking snaps away from everybody on the New Orleans Saints offense, man.
Which is just one reason why I'm kind of staying away from them. All over the place. So, all right, we like to close out each one of these training camp reports with one question, and it is, who's a player that you've been, noticing from reports and things like that is going to surprise people, good or bad, that fantasy managers need to know about?
I mean, there's not a whole lot to take from the New Orleans Saints so far, especially from a camp perspective. The guys who we know are going to be the guys heading into the season have been that for them. Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara has shown what he can do in the limited usage, especially in the preseason games that they put him out there. But a guy who I don't try to put too much stock into preseason stats, but a guy who's really kind of dominated the target load for the New Orleans Saints. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, maybe it's a bad thing because he's on the field too much. But A.T. Perry, I think, is lined up to be the wide receiver 3 for New Orleans this year. Are you guys A.T. Perry guys?
I kind of dig him. Like he's a guy that, you know, after the draft he's not there, and I hit the little star next to his name because I just kind of want to keep tabs on him. You know what I mean?
Totally
so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. So if he could take that wide receiver 3 role that maybe Mike Thomas filled last year, and 40 targets, 50 targets, maybe he is a field stretcher. 19.76 yards per reception in the preseason so far. He's big bodied, big catch radius. If he can utilize his end zone potential in that offense, he could be the guy that New Orleans Saints needs to score touchdowns when they get down there.
Yeah. I did read something very early that he was being used. He's a big red zone target because he's just got that big body, but he's also a burner too. Like he's just got
that speed.
He's just got like a, you know, good receiver, like build. Got a little bit of it all, just, you know, maybe not the most polished receiver either. So that's why he's not like, you know, up there. But all right, Chris. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, man. This was fantastic. Before we let you go, I want to give you the opportunity to let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on this season.
Yeah, again, appreciate you guys for having me talk New Orleans Saints heading into the NFL season. You can find me at FFChrisB on X, all my work at Fantasy and Frames and Club Fantasy FFL. Every Monday night, I'm on the One Foot Down Show, which is a college fantasy football podcast. And then this is our last Monday of Mocking with the Stars, our mocking series that we hosted throughout the year, me and Gator J on Club Fantasy FFL. And we got Lindellians on joining us this coming Monday for our last. Yeah, it's not a kickers only draft. I think I've said that 4 times announcing her, but she's awesome, man. I can't wait to chop it up.
She's fantastic. Make sure she wears that Queen's Classic belt.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So, all right, man. Thanks again, and hopefully we can do it again.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, so that's going to be it for the New Orleans Saints training camp report. Want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, that like button, leave those comments. We appreciate it. And make sure you check out the playlist we got set up here on YouTube, and all the rest of the shows over on Apple or Spotify, wherever you're listening. And, you know, get all this information you can get before you head into your drafts. It's great stuff. And Dylan, unless you got anything else, I think we out.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
All right, peace.